Well, hi, friends. I trust you're doing great. I thought for me in this season it was important to do a bit of personal reflection, but felt I wanted to kind of pass some of that on. I think, in previous years, we've done our big volunteer celebration where there's an opportunity for me to kind of share a few thoughts, some encouragement, some reflections. And because of this COVID season and not being able to have that gathering at the end of this year, there's some thoughts that I want to share with you briefly. I guess as an encouragement, also for some of you to give you a bit of intel on my story. Some of you are fairly new to our community, and so I thought it might be nice for you to hear a little bit of my story. This year, 2020, I am ending 20 years in leadership of leading Kingsway, and 2 decades. And so in some ways it's kind of, wow, where did that time go? 20 years ago, I would never have imagined that this is where we would be as a faith community. No idea that, I would last that long, that you would still have me, and that I'd still be around 20 years later. And, just to assure you, I still feel very much called to lead at Kingsway in a different way moving forward, and excited about what that is going to look like. And so, when I was 14, I came to Kingsway as a 14-year-old lad from Adelaide. At 19, I was overseeing our youth ministry. At 23, I was overseeing our worship ministry. And then, probably against what I thought would happen, at the age of 30, I became a worship pastor here at Kingsway, and then at 34 became the senior pastor at the start of 2001. And when I look back, it's like, wow, okay, people that do know my story would know that being the kind of senior pastor, the lead pastor of a church was something that I never ever thought that I would do. It was something that I think ran from, tried to avoid. I was convinced that when God said Brett, he got the name mixed up. And so, I was kind of like the reluctant leader, if you like, but knew in my heart of hearts that this was what God had called me to do and to be. If you look at the overview, and I'm sharing this just to give you some context. In 2001, we had a little campus, one campus in Caringbah on the corner of Jacaranda Road in the Kingsway, with about 150 people, 3 church staff, which I think at the time was me, Brooke Stewart, and an office admin person. And so, as you can see, in 20 years, God has certainly taken us on a journey. And, we now have 3 campuses, 15 church staff. The church has grown and our community impact has grown. And, it's certainly been an extremely exciting church to be involved in. And I'm super grateful and thankful that God called me in to lead Kingsway 20 years ago. I do look quite young though, so 20 years of ministry has certainly aged me. And I think that's probably part of the reason why I've lost my hair, but Anyway, so I thought I'd just give you a little snapshot of some of the things that we have walked through over the years. I don't want to go into too much detail. I don't want to bore you with it, but I feel like it's cool to know in 2001 to 2005, the first 5 years, there's a very young-looking team there. Kind of like the beginnings for me, as I was learning leadership. I certainly went into this not knowing a stack of what I was in for. And I think one of the biggest transitions from kind of being involved in church and leading at different levels to then stepping in to that senior kind of role is the spiritual weight of responsibility that you now carry. And I don't, as much as people may have told me that was coming, had warned me that was coming, I didn't really expect it to be as significant as it was. One of the first things that we did in that first 5 years was relocate our church from the facility that we'd been in ever since pretty much the church started in 1947 on the corner of Jacaranda Road and the Kingsway. They'd been through 3 building programs in that location is when we made the move to here. And we it was a long process, an often painful process of designing, of working with councils and builders and real estates to try and make the whole thing happen. And there were so many obstacles to that journey. Like, we really felt at one point 2 years earlier that, God had given us a building around the corner from here, and then that all fell through, and we were like, what are you doing, God? But God had something better for us and led us to this place. And the whole journey was an absolute miracle and a privilege to be able to, lead our church into this space. And again, we are now a church. We have 3 campuses, and we have no debt as a church. And I think that in itself is a blessing and a miracle for us as a community. A few other things that have happened over the number of years that I've been serving here. We've baptized over 400 people. We've given over $1 million to global and local mission. We've raised up leaders that are now serving and leading in other churches around Australia. We led the Shire Church Unity and Prayer Movement for over 12 years, and we've successfully rehoused over 350 people. There's a lot that God has done in and through His church over 20 years. And, I look at those things and go, wow, what a privilege it has been for me to be able to lead in this context, to be able to empower others, to be able to serve our community, and to be able to see, God's kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, because these things to me are great examples of God's kingdom coming on earth as it is in heaven. So the next 5 years was 2006 to 2010, a much younger looking Jen and I, and a couple of things that happened in that season. The first thing that happened was that's when we planted Sea Change Campus, which was a challenge again in and of itself. It brought a whole bunch of other things that we hadn't considered. And when Brooke first came to me with this heart in him to, start something new, and how would that look? And we really didn't feel like we wanted to create 2 separate communities. We really felt that God spoke very clearly about us remaining the one church, but very different. And it was an exciting time, and it's exciting to see, what God has done in and through Sea Change, in and through the leadership of Brooke and Tammy over the last 15 years, and not quite 15 years. And, it's great that we have these 2 very unique but very aligned and connected campuses here in Sydney. There was a whole bunch of other stuff that as a leader I had to navigate that I never really thought I would. Our church grew so quickly, particularly when we moved into this building. We grew at a really rapid pace, and it was almost like, the years 2006 to 10, we were kind of dealing with some of the growth pains of not having maybe some of the right procedures and policies and things in place that kind of would help us manage a larger community of people. And so for me, the focus in those 5 years was really about, critical leadership, is making some decisions, and, and sometimes, people didn't think we could get there. And I'm so grateful that we're still here 20 years later. We had some opposition. We had people come up against us. We had people tell us we needed to do certain things, or they were going to do certain things. But we stuck to what we believed God had called us to do. And even in the midst of when things got hard for us financially, we were, in some incredible financial challenges, that we continued to step up and believe that God was leading us and moving us. And I'm grateful for that. One of the things that people don't talk about a lot in the whole idea of church health and growth is this stat. In the last 20 years, we've had over 400 people leave the church. I don't know if that's like exciting news, but I kind of felt like as I've reflected, it's important. There's been people that have left for a variety of different reasons, to start new churches, to move out of the area. But we've also had people leave that didn't like us anymore, and that's okay. And so, each one of these people, in a sense, kind of like it's kind of notched something on my heart. I think it's really challenging as a pastor when you're leading people, particularly those that may have left because they didn't like us anymore, or they didn't align to what we felt God was calling us to do or to become, and they felt called somewhere else. All those reasons, for right or for wrong, it does hurt the pastor a little bit. You know, there is an impact on us as leaders, on our pastoral team, when we see people walk away. In 20 years, say like, I don't know what the numbers are. I did a rough guesstimate. That's only 20 a year, so it's maybe not too bad. They call it the churn factor in church growth, church health circles. But we've had a bunch of people leave. We've had a bunch of people come. And God is good, because I think God is continuing to bring the right people into our community of faith over the years. You know, Kingsway is 73 years young. And I've now been here for 41, roughly, of those years. So more than half of the church life, I have been there and been here and been a part of what God has been doing in and through His church. Pretty exciting. 2011, 2015, I think the two key things in that season. One was God called us to plant our third campus, to start our third partnership with a local church in Cambodia, and we started Kingsway Cambodia, and you know that's been an exciting journey. Something that for me has been has really enlivened me. Seeing what God is doing over there. And you know, one of the things I love, and people that have been to our Kingsway Church in Cambodia, we've done a bunch of trips there over the last 5 or 6 years, will tell you is you walk into Kingsway Cambodia and you feel like you're walking into Kingsway Caringbah or Sea Change. There's this sense of the same spirit. We have the same DNA. We are called to do the same things and be the same things. And, you know, pastors Panette and Shay Pike do an awesome job in leading that faith community. And it's been an absolute delight to see what God has been doing over there. I think the other big focus for me, and I think part of this was my own personal journey and challenge around the idea of spiritual formation. You know, it really became something that was so important. So I felt like, you know, we entered out of this kind of season of critical leadership into this season of spiritual leadership. You know, where God really began to challenge me. You know, I was a little bit of a striver. You know, I was kind of like, you know, constantly trying to, I think, prove myself and tick boxes and achieve. And not that there's anything wrong with those things, but I really think God did a work in me in this season. And I think the partnership in Cambodia was part of that. My own personal journey was part of that. Probably where I was at an age was part of that. And this real deep inner connection in my own spiritual formation. That God was calling me to lead more spiritually, you know, to not necessarily come up with all the grand plans and procedures and visions, but to actually lead our community from a spiritual place of formation that God was doing in me. And we began to then impart that, Jen and I in particular, began to impart that to our community and lead our staff and lead our church through this season of spiritual formation, which I think's been absolutely critical to who we are as a community now. And, you know, one of the things I find fascinating, I have a lot of friends in ministry, and I think one of the things that I believe is testimony to who we are as a community of faith is what I would, you know, the longevity of some of our team. And, you know, I just did a few stats, and this is not everybody, but, you know, the team, we have 100 years of experience between us, you know, and we're not that old. Brooke and Tammy, I've been working with Brooke and Tammy for over 22 years. With Kim and Troy for over 16, Dave and Elise for over 14, Shaz and Muzz for over 16, Fiona for over 12, Avril for over 11, Greg and Chrissy for over 12. It's like, you know, that journey in and of itself is so unique and so special. And so I believe, you know, God ordained that He has brought people together to stay the course. You know, I would never have dreamed or imagined that 20 years ago that I would have got the privilege to do ministry alongside some of the most amazing people that have helped not just me become who I am, helped our church become who our church is. And the impact that we are having on and in our community is absolutely spectacular. 2016 to 2020, I think, has been a real, for me personally, a real season of what I would describe as adaptive leadership. You know, there's been this constant need for me to change what I do, how I do it, and the context that I'm doing it in. And I've both loved that and wrestled with that. Some of you know I lived in Cambodia last year for 6 months. There were seasons where, I was engaged at a higher level with our Phnom Penh campus. There were times when I were more engaged with Sea Change in Caringbah. There were times when, our leadership was very challenged in the context of what God was doing here at Caringbah. And then, of course, COVID hit at the beginning of this year, and that meant that, God called me to kind of step back in and re-engage in a different way to lead and manage that crisis, the pandemic, how we respond to that, what it is that we do. And so I think this whole idea of constantly being called to rethink how we do, what we do, rethinking church, and my leadership having to be so adaptive in that season. And I kind of, I know when I look back, I see that in these seasons of our life as a community of faith that, if it wasn't for the spiritual leadership, for that formation that God did in me in the years before that, I don't think I would have had what I needed, the capacity to lead in such what I would be a fairly adaptive season. I think the other thing to focus on in this season was the increase of our community engagement. One of the things that has absolutely delighted me over the last 4 or 5 years is how God has led us to serve our community. Through Kingsway Community Care, through Platform 9, Sea Change Op Shop, through Jacaranda Cottage, and all the kind of things that God just keeps raising up opportunities for us, raising up people, raising up opportunities and support and partnerships for us to engage and serve and really invest ourselves fully into those that are less fortunate, into the poor, into the homeless, into those that are, suffering from domestic violence. That God has called us to love and serve and honor and be with these people. And this level of mission, this local mission that I believe is God's thumbprint on who we are as a community of faith, and I believe will continue to grow, that our local mission will outgrow our local ministry. That what we do for and in the church will become much and much less than what God does in and through us out there in the community. And I actually believe that that's what being the church is all about. So the last 5 years have been exciting, challenging, and I guess that leads me to today, 20 years. I'm curious, like I'm sure you are, what's the next 20 years going to look like? And to be honest, I still see myself here in 20 years' time. And God will lead me through a whole bunch of new seasons of change, of different roles and functions, and the way I support and engage and lead. And what that looks like will be different, and I'm excited about that. I'm excited for the future. I'm excited who God is bringing in to lead us forward. I'm excited about the possibilities. I'm excited about what our next campus and our campus after that might look like in these next 5, 10, 15, and 20 years as God continues to shape who we are as a community that wholeheartedly desires to love God and love others authentically and to live that out in practical ways that see our communities, both here and overseas, transformed by the love and power and presence of God. So bless you. It's been an incredible journey. Jen and I are both so grateful for the journey that we've walked on with you, whether that's been for just the last year or whether that's been for the last 20 years. We love all of you so much. So grateful that we have been placed here, that God called us here. And I know I have this sense, God called me here, and I think it's for the long haul. So you're stuck with me. Hope that's okay. And I look forward to what's ahead. Take care and be blessed.